but I also think that it's sometimes, that you don't have to be polite and you should have a backbone for sure. But knowing that differences, I think, comes with experience and wisdom. So it's trials and tribulations.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. It's Megan Henry here today with my co-host and partner Oliver Brooks. How are you this afternoon, Oliver?
I'm doing well. You?
Good. So I'm excited for today. We have on Amanda Reynolds, who's a claims attorney for Prime Insurance, which we've had on Prime Insurance's CEO on, Rick Lindsay, a few months ago. So I'm happy to have Amanda on. But what's interesting about Amanda's story is that she was a practicing attorney in New York for several years before changing sides and moving over to be a claims attorney. So I'm really interested to hear like her take on kind of working on one side and switching gears and working on the other one. So I'm excited to talk to her today. So, stay tuned. And of course, as always, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe below. So hi, Amanda. Welcome to joining us on The Defense Never Rests. So happy to have you today.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And I'm here with my partner, Oliver Brooks. He's joining me for another podcast.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So Amanda, you are a claims attorney for Prime Insurance. And some of our listeners may or not have heard of Prime Insurance. We had your CEO on a few months ago, Rick Lindsay. But just as a little background, Prime is based out of Utah. But actually today you're sitting in New York, right?
Correct. Yeah. I encountered Prime when I was actually at another firm, and we went out to pitch to Prime when I was working in private practice in New York. And I loved it so much that I wound up going out to Utah, uprooting and going out to Utah to work for the company.
Yeah. And that's actually what I want to talk about a little bit with you. So you're a claims attorney now, but you started off working in litigation in New York, right?
Correct. Yeah. I was admitted to the bar in New York in 2012 after graduating from St. John's in 2011. And I worked my whole career in New York, never, ever contemplating leaving, and kind of just on a whim came out to Utah.
Utah is awesome.
It is. It is rad, right? It's been an amazing experience. Skied before, and having moved out to Utah, which is just, it's a great state. It's so much to do. It's been awesome.
So, but when you were in New York, what kind of practice were you doing at that time?
Sure. So as out the gate of law school, I started in insurance defense, civil litigation, practicing personal injury defense. And that was the focus of my practice for the remainder of my career in New York. Although I could say that having a title of lawyer opened the door for friends and family and friends of friends to kind of ask for help in any arena, really. So I would say I've done some in everything, a little bit of everything.
Oliver could probably speak to this more than I can, but New York is like its whole new animal as far as the courts go, especially in the boroughs. So how is that coming out as like a just graduating law school, kind of getting thrown into the trenches, into, the dredges of New York practice in the city?
Yeah. I mean, well, the first day I was admitted to the bar was my first encounter in court as an admitted attorney in the Law and Order court, which is always kind of a humbling experience when you get to walk up those steps and, feel as though you've gotten to where you want to be. And then you're thrown into kind of the depths of an inferno with anywhere from preliminary conferences to pretrial conferences, and there's just so much to do and so much to learn. So it was great. It's definitely, from what I understand, a more plaintiff-oriented venue, but it makes the defense better.
And you show up and you're like, I'm finally here, I've made it. And then some per diem attorney shows up, like, we're going to have a continuance, right?
Yeah, let's kick that in and come back next month and the month after. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And where orders mean nothing. Like, oh, I have this order saying you have to provide discovery by this date. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah, they're suggested orders with suggested guidelines and deadlines that no one ever really meets, which which from what I understand may change with this COVID. I think New York is kind of adopting more of a New Jersey outlook as far as orders and deadlines, or even a more federal position. So I'm hoping that's the case, because a lot of time that the attorneys have been spent billing or commuting back and forth to court for what could be 10-minute conferences or uploading of agreed upon orders. It can be changed to actually substantive lawyering instead of really kind of, the mundane.
Yeah, I think we found that in Philly as well. Like Philly had a lot of like unnecessary things that you needed to show up for. And I think COVID has kind of forced Philly to be like, wait, maybe we don't need everyone to show up for this conference, that we're just going to set deadlines, that no input is really mattered from. It doesn't matter what the council has to say. They just set whatever deadlines they want. So
That's right.
they're
That's
kind of
so true.
eliminating it.
I completely agree. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that's the case.
Hopeful. Cross your fingers.
At least for the younger associates who have to go all the time. That's for sure.
So, starting off as like a young female attorney in New York, and which is, always a heavily male driven field. Did you ever experience any like gender bias, any, either where you worked or in cases in your other counsel?
Yeah, I attributed it to gender at the time. Who knows? But I think that you can always, characterize something as however you'd like to characterize it. I thought it was gender bias, but for whatever reason, I felt I was being treated differently or condescended at the time, whether it be because of how I looked or how I dressed or how I presented myself, or people's notions of what they preconceived notions of who they thought I was. I have a tendency to be a bit sarcastic, so I think that kind of combated things, but there were always times when, you just felt as though you were being treated differently. And, I think that with nothing but the greatest respect for RBG, the way that she has transformed our country and women's rights, that I hope that women lawyers take her advice and handle that with a little bit more grace than I did, especially. But maybe a little bit of a less tendency to respond to it and just to ignore it.
So what kind of, now I'm more curious about what kind of non-graceful responses you may have had.
Yeah, I think I had a tendency when I first started to respond to emails very lengthily, and I probably could have just been better served by silence and just putting my head down and getting back to work. I think engaging is the problem, and I didn't realize it at the time. I definitely would have changed that going forward, but there are certainly instances when I'd say my Irish up and responded, but I think there is a time for that, a time and place as well.
Yeah, Oliver likes to write long emails all the time.
Yeah,
That's not true.
Probably not for the same reasons, but.
So sitting as where you are today, after going through that and kind of learning from yourself, what sort of advice would you give to a younger female attorney and the kind of standing in the same shoes as you were just coming out of law school, with experiencing some of that same pushback? What would you say?
I think that it's definitely the better choice to kind of channel your inner grace and ignore it and get back to work and push through. But I also think that it's sometimes, that you don't have to be polite, and you should have a backbone for sure. But knowing that differences, I think, comes with experience and wisdom. So it's trials and tribulations.
I remember years ago, like I had a pushback with counsel, and he was been practicing for years upon years, and I was probably 2 or 3 years out, and he was really challenging me, and I got so angry, and I got back to my office, and I was like banging on the keyboard, pounding out like a nasty response. And one of the partners came into my office and said, Megan, you attract more bees with honey. Just chill out. And then they instituted a 48-hour rule on angry emails for me that I had to step away. And it worked, and I've calmed down since, but.
Right, yes. Usually it took me 48 hours to draft those response emails, but I think I started writing emails to myself and just sending them to myself instead. So journaling.
It's also, the term is also hot letter. That's what my daughter calls it. Abraham Lincoln used to do them. Yeah, you learned something.
Well, then, yeah, good advice.
So you're practicing in New York for for a few years, and then you go on this pitch and you meet Prime, or do you meet with Rick Lindsay, the CEO, and you're just like decide this is what you want to do? How does this unfold?
Sure. So I was invited to Utah to make this pitch, and I had never really traveled this far for a work pitch before. So I figured something was important about this company. I did some background research on Rick, on the company, and then I realized that I actually had a former colleague who was working at Prime. So I called her up, and one of the first questions I asked her was, well, how does Prime approach a situation where there's a clearly frivolous claim and the insurer did nothing wrong, but it's the cost of litigation is just warrants, kind of settling it. And what I was told and what I learned is Rick's principle is that we don't just settle because the cost of litigation warrants it, where our insured is right. And the cost really doesn't, what the principle is not sacrificed for the cost. And as an attorney who had been practicing in New York, where there were so many frivolous claims, and I found myself not really practicing law, but calculating settlements, I really was fascinated because I hadn't encountered any company like it that would do that. And I just really liked that approach. I thought it was honest and fair. And I considered him a bit of a renegade after learning. He takes his helicopter to meet with all of our insurers. And, he's really not out there, but he is out there in so many ways.
So when you first move from the role as like a practicing attorney, moving, working up files, litigating cases, and then suddenly you have to like pivot and now you're a claims attorney. How did you shift your focus to now suddenly kind of sit, I wouldn't say on the other side, but like in a different seat, looking at cases from a different angle?
Sure. Well, I think I kind of am looking at them from the same angle, really, as far as the focus that we place on investigation of the claim from the outset. And that's really what I was doing a lot as an attorney. But with respect to the pivot, I think my day was no longer 24 hours, it was 9. And that was a little bit of an ego blow to me because I had been working in the courtrooms and litigating, and now I came to an office where I was no longer needed after 6 p.m. So to me, it was a half day, and that was a bit of a hard transition. So
you're the only person who's ever said that in the history of
yeah, it's I guess a little bit unorthodox, but it obviously it benefited me. So.
Well, yeah, now you suddenly have time for yourself and hobbies.
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting, but self-improvement and all the things that I didn't have time for before. So I think that was one of the hardest things to get used to. But I guess as a claims attorney, the difference is that we're really directing the litigation. So we work with our attorneys in tandem, and we're kind of in lockstep, but I just don't find it to be as incredibly stressful when you're just telling people what to do as opposed to doing it. So.
Yeah. And it must be, in a way, easier if you have this mindset, if you have that Rick and the company is standing behind you. If you have a frivolous claim, you're not going to have someone, playing Monday morning quarterback afterwards saying, why didn't you do this? Like, no, this is a philosophy. This is how we're moving forward. So it kind of takes a little bit of maybe the pressure off your back, knowing that you're going to be backed up. Someone's not going to come in later and say, no, you should have done this, this, and this instead.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as an attorney, when you are billing your time to investigate and do everything that you really should do, that's taken off my plate. It's the concern of it is taken off my plate because I'm still doing it, but I'm not billing anything. So I can spend immense time doing what should be done without the worry that the cost is going to be concerning the client or something that I'll be admonished for by a supervisor because the bill is suddenly 80 grand and it's a 20 grand case maybe. But having this
having a background litigating cases, do you have a little, are you more scrutinizing of your attorneys? Because you can kind of see through the nonsense, like, how much time things should take, or what should be done, or what really needs to be done. I mean, do you find you're able to scrutinize things a little bit more closely?
Well, yes and no. So I scrutinize everything to the umpteenth degree, but I think that we are very selective with our attorneys because we trust them to do their job. Rick said, I'm not concerned about rates, which I don't know the veracity of that, but it's the matter that you hire someone to do their job and to do it right. And when you understand them and have met them, you expect that that's what they do. So I'm not too concerned with the BS that you normally get. Sometimes there's a tendency for attorneys to, surrender to the mundane and just bill for billing's sake. But I haven't found that too much here at Prime. And fortunately, we're able to work with attorneys that I've known professionally and I've come to meet and learn. I really trust them. And I think I have the opportunity to review bills. And if there's any issues, that's usually administrative, just oversight. So I haven't had too much trouble.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Attorneys doing what they're supposed to do is a great thing for everyone, I think.
It's refreshing, I guess.
Yeah, I could say that.
You mentioned this before about Rick, flying his helicopter, to meet his insureds. I mean, I find that to be such a impressive feat that he does, to make a point to meet his or Prime's insureds and really put his face with the company and meet face to face with his clients. I think it's super impressive. But have you ever heard from any of the insureds them worrying oh, why is the big guy coming here? Am I getting cut? It's pretty abnormal that it could raise some red flags or alarms.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Rick is probably 6'6". To me, he's like 7'6". And when he comes to visit, I'm sure it looks as though he's enforcing, especially in a helicopter. So I think it's great. It's amazing. And I have had the opportunity to try and schedule some of those meetings and also have attended some of them. So in the first instance, well, just call me back asking, well, why does he want to meet us? What's special about us, or what do we do wrong? And when I met with the insurers on those same risk management meetings that we have, many of them assumed it was kind of an audit, like a surprise audit, secret shopper type thing. And it's kind of funny because it's absolutely not. We go there to foster the partnership and to understand the insured's business, their wants and their needs, and make sure that what we're supplying to them, it matches their demand, as opposed to them paying for something they don't need or not having the insurance that they should have, contrarily. So I think that it's incredible, and I don't know any other company that does it.
I don't know. I mean, well, I've heard of a few, but it's certainly, I think, less common than the norm. And, I think it's great. And we had Rick on the podcast a few months ago, and, he has very personal stories to tell about, he knows the specifics about each client, which I think is great.
Yeah, he knows everything about pretty much everything insurance related. And, he's really passionate about it. I like working for him because he's no nonsense. You know what he's thinking, and he stands by what he says. And that's what I think everyone should have the opportunity to work with. So
let me throw this out at you though. So, we know that you have this model, let's not just pay on, frivolous claims. But let's just say you have a catastrophic case, the injuries are terrible. Liability is great, but you're in one of those judicial hellhole venues. What is your approach? Does your approach change for venue if it's at one of those judicial hellholes versus some conservative venue? Or is it just, you stay the course? It's a nonsense claim, so we are just going to defend it.
Well, that's a good question. And in contemplating that, I think you really have to define what a judicial hellhole is. I kind of don't believe in them. I think that anything that happens judicially, you can handle on the appeal side, or anything, you can handle that through recourse and litigation. And it really comes down to the jury that you pick if you do go to trial. So what it comes down to is I do believe in ineffective lawyering. And if you can't handle the defense, then that's when it becomes a judicial hellhole, so to speak. So I think it's more derivative of the attorneys than it is the judges. That being said, there are certain venues where there are nuclear verdicts, and that could be the hell that you're referring to. But I think that when you have a case where there is a death and there is something that went wrong, the goal is to compensate the family for what they've lost and for what the future would have brought them, to put them in the place, so to speak, where they would have been, which they never can be. And I think that's true. A plaintiff attorney would say that as much as a defense attorney who wants the just result. So when you're looking at a claim, I think you have to look at the value and then allocate that amongst the liable defendants as well as possible. So, if there's an accident and someone did something wrong, it's just as easy to get it done in the beginning and mediate that than it is to go through a protracted litigation that becomes oftentimes highly adversarial and hostile, and then results in an unjust result for whichever side. So I think you have to really put your self-interest aside, or the interest of your insured, for the whole. And I think if both sides do that, then you come to the right result.
How do you handle it when you have big damages, you have potential liability, but only if the plaintiff is successful in sort of expanding the already established law on that subject? We have a couple of those right now where we have really big damages. Mm-hmm. We have law that says we should not be exposed to those damages, but it's the kind of case law that is left kind of soft and a little bit open to mm-hmm. where they could pry it open, and if they get to us, it's gonna be bad.
Right.
So you can report to your client all you want. Nope. There's never been a case where this has been allowed before, but maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think probably you would take that to a motion for summary judgment to see if you can have that decided by the court before you go to trial. And then if you do ultimately go to trial, I always look at it like if you're risking a nuclear verdict at trial, where someone could be awarded a windfall of billions or $100 million in New York, then, it's really what do you think is fair? A balloon offer or settlement that would be fair, I think would be the right way to go on that. But, you certainly don't want to be the one to try the case where you lose that $200 million and you could have established a just result before that.
And made bad law.
Yeah, right. At the same time.
Now we've got a couple of motions for summary judgment that are just like that are pending, and the courts are taking their sweet time.
Well, and I mean, and it happens a lot, and especially in jurisdictions like, if you're in the boroughs in New York, it could be a year and a plus before you get a decision on a summary judgment motion. Same goes for Philadelphia. It could be forever. Whereas some other counties, I had one recently that was decided in like 10 days.
Wow.
Not good for me, but it was decided.
Like, this one's easy.
Yeah, I think anytime you're valuing a case, you also have to take that into consideration, and length of time, the interest that's accruing against you. And, I think that's something that all firms should be considering, especially because you don't want to be the one to write the letter to the judge saying, hey, where's our decision?
No, we don't do it.
Yeah.
Never works out.
Wait, who are you? Okay, I'll make my decision.
Are you working today?
But what stock do you put into opposing counsel? Because, I look at it, and Oliver probably will agree with me. Like, you have some counsel who, they are going to spend the time and the money, retain the experts, and they are going to put money into their case to work it up and to build their case and build their damages. And then you have those other counsel who aren't going to do anything. They're not even going to answer the phone when you call them. They're not going to retain an expert. They're going to do nothing. And while, it shouldn't be this way, but if they're going to spend the time to invest in their case, sometimes they make it better just on investing in their case. And it can change at least in my eyes, I believe it can change your evaluation of it. Do you put much stock into who your attorneys are going up against and how you expect that they're going to build up their case?
I think you always have to take that into consideration. Especially, I think that the more time and effort someone puts into their case, the more that they show a dedication to it, the more value it's worth potentially, if they're a good attorney and doing what they should be doing. However, I kind of take somewhat of an any given Sunday approach to the reputation or experience, because if you do good work and you do what you're supposed to do and you're prepared, then I don't think that any amount of experience has anything to do with it. It's how you relate to a jury, I think, and how you're able to explain the legal principles in a manner simple enough to be the translator. And that's really all you are as an attorney.
The better attorneys who work their cases, they're more predictable too, because you know what they're going to do. It happens to be the right stuff, but you can see it from a mile away. Some of the other guys, I call them the Ron Popeil, set it and forget it. You might be too young to remember those, but the infomercial guy, sometimes you never know what they're going to do. They've been absent for the last year and a half. Now, all of a sudden, you've got 12 expert reports and hand delivery of 15 bankers boxes full of medical records. And you're like, where did this come from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a case now where I thought that the venue of the counsel made them somewhat inexperienced, and now I'm looking at it from a different angle where I think they're actually being more strategic than I thought. So I have to revamp my defense, and you can't ever make assumptions. So it's interesting. Keeps you on your toes, I would say.
Well, I'd also say a lot of times with some of those counsel you hear nothing from, it's almost like they're at the end and they panic and they're like, I'm just going to throw everything at the wall and let's see what sticks and cause a bunch of chaos to get, kind of muddy the air a little bit.
That's the smoke and mirrors that work. If you're up against that and you don't properly defend it, then it works, because especially if you're talking criminally, there's any sort of doubt, it kind of works for some of them. I don't think it's the best route, but
there's one firm I've dealt with before, and I'm not going to name who they are, but they're notoriously like that. But they tend to see like, well, we're just going to fly the plane into the side of the mountain and let's just see what happens, and they pull lots of tricks out their pockets, and you just never know. You can't even anticipate some of them. They're just out from left field.
Yeah, and I think when I first started, I thought that was their strategy and they knew what they're doing. And sometimes now I just think they don't, have no idea. But sometimes when they're confident in their opinion, whether or not they're right or completely wrong, you get thrown off a bit. And sometimes judges do too. And that's kind of one trick I learned about being an attorney when I was younger was, confidence is not it is key, but it's not an indicator of legal propriety for sure.
Absolutely not. There's a lot of super confident lawyers out there. But we've talked a lot about trials, but now we're in this like COVID world that, the weight of a trial down the road is very far down the road, because no one really knows when any of these things are going to happen. So does that change how we look at things, and how, we don't have that pressure point that we're like, oh, see you on the courtroom steps, like it's not really there right now, because who knows when that's going to happen.
Right. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think at Crime, for the most part, we've kind of approached that as a time for settling the claims that should be settled or that are conducive to settlement, and leveraging that the way we do at, say, Christmas, where people are looking for holiday checks, and that's kind of the way it's looked at, or Hanukkah or any other holiday. People are looking for a payment, and so we say, like, basically you could have the settlement today, or you could wait and see how the chips fall, but that won't happen for at least a year or 2 years at this point, given the way the courts are. And I know that because of the backup with criminal court, civil judges have been assigned to criminal cases, which takes away from the processing of trials in the civil realm. So,
And not only that, I think, the jury makeup is going to be definitely not a true cross section of the population, because I think there's going to be, older, elder, like people who like more often than not are more willing to serve on juries, who aren't going to be able to do that or not willing to do that because of risks that could be associated with that. I think it's just going to be very difficult.
absolutely. And to kind of dovetail on that, the concept that people who are really struggling, lost their jobs, and they are experiencing the plight too, are no longer as sympathetic to other people who can also, really, make do and support themselves should they want to, instead of relying on a settlement payment for a frivolous injury claim. So, hopefully it's kind of shaking everyone up and making everyone a little bit more honest.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
So, and I want to touch back on this. So earlier you talked about how now that you've moved over to this claims attorney role, you get to really control the litigation. And we didn't really touch on that then. And I'm curious, how is your approach on that? Like, are you calling the shots, saying like, look, attorney, this is what I want you to do? Or are you waiting for the recommendations from your attorneys?
I think for the most part, we are directing the litigation and telling them how to do it. I think there's no way that I can be intimately familiar with all 50 states' laws, and we rely on counsel for their local expertise, I think, in the most part, and for that help. And we don't get to meet the litigants, so it's difficult when you're on the phone with them, as opposed to meeting someone and kind of having your own aspects or indication as to what's going on. I think every time you meet someone, it's much different. So I think that our attorneys in every arena and jurisdiction are exactly what we want in an attorney. So we do rely on them. We don't ask for necessarily the lengthy regurgitation of medical records or a report on something that we can read for ourselves. And I think that, it allows our attorneys to be attorneys as opposed to summarizers or kind of drones. So.
Right. And I mean, that's also kind of a refreshing angle, because I mean, I do think a lot of times, you get caught up with having to do the summaries and, those not smaller tasks, but those process tasks that, while important, might take away from some of the focus you need to spend on the actual real issues and, formulating a plan and a defense to respond or attack those issues.
And some of that stuff, if you read it from the outside, occasionally we get, you'll find that either you as an attorney are asked to review another attorney's work product, for something like for excess coverage or something like that. Or it happens to you where they're like, send your whole file over to John Smith next door so he can nitpick through everything and see if he agrees with what you've done. That does happen. And some of that,
right,
what you were just describing, can come across as kind of clearly CYA. Like, here's why we have chosen to withdraw our motion. And you have a 4-page thing about why you withdrew a discovery motion. It's ridiculous. Like, it's when all you need to say is they gave us most of what we wanted.
And what a waste of time.
Yeah, I think, it's hard. It's definitely hard, given the volume, to be perfect on every aspect of every case and every assignment, especially reporting things that you already know to do your job to an insurance company. So we don't ask that of our attorneys. We ask them to focus on what's important, and we are kept in the loop via phone and the ways that are efficient and cost effective without being a detriment to the defense or taking away from any aspect of it. So I like our process.
Now, if you were to kind of switch gears to what you you don't like what does like keeps you up at night, or is really like a pain point for you that you'd either like to see changed, or like you just wish you didn't have to deal with anymore?
The sounds of New York City.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, do you mean as in claims, or
Yes.
just
Well,
generally litigation?
in life could be too. I don't care.
How much time do you have? Yeah, I think the little things that everybody deals with on a regular basis are the inefficiencies of some, like, programs, or having to do things that are a bit more mundane, and that taking up my time to do the more substantive things. So I think I'm a big fan of efficiency and maximizing productivity. So I think those little things are really all I could think of. Like processing invoices, something I'm not a fan of, but those things don't keep me up at night, I think. But just making sure that I'm doing my job well, and looking at everything, as our attorneys are expected to do, and not missing anything is something that does. But that's about it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all, at least on my side, and I think Oliver could probably agree with me. I think you always have that inner panic that, regardless of how many times you may have looked at the due date or the calendar, and you wake up in the middle of the night like, oh crap, did I did I miss something?
Oh yeah.
Like, and that probably never goes away, even if you're not, in the trenches practicing. You probably never are able to like shake that middle of the night panic about deadlines.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't consider myself in the trenches or working in a coal mine or anything that's crazy here. I'm not a neurosurgeon, so I take it for what it's worth. But I guess, kind of in furtherance of that, what might keep me up at night is making sure that I, as a female, am doing what I should be doing to advance, us as a minority, including, all females. And I think that is really something that keeps me up at night, is making sure that I'm presenting myself the way I should, or as a reflection of my alma maters and my family. So
I might be putting you on the spot a little bit, but you already are. So, I mean, how do you do that? Like, how do you ensure that you're paving that path forward?
Yeah, who knows? But I think the way I try to handle female, like, feminism and advocating for females and minorities is just to act like one of the guys, and to make sure that I'm in that majority, and to act like it. And that's the only way I can really figure that out. I don't know if it's proper or correct, or if it's working, but that's how I do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the answer for it myself. I mean, I have 2 daughters, so I always just try to teach them, like, just raise your hand, speak up, and, don't be intimidated by anyone. I don't know if it's working. They're too young, but I think my 5-year-old's not intimidated by anything but dogs. So.
Neither one of them likes me.
No, they don't.
Like, came into the room, saw me, and walked right back out.
Well, that's not entirely true. Eleanor remembers you as the guy who tried to ask her all the colors of the crayons.
Just trying to be nice, and she gave me the most side-eye, askance look you've ever seen.
They know not to speak to strangers.
The side eye. Yeah.
You were there, though.
Doesn't matter. So, Amanda, so now you lived in New York how long?
My whole life, except for college. Yeah.
So you go from living in New York, in the city, and then, you move out to Utah. Like, how has that transition been?
Yeah, it was a bit of culture shock in the beginning. I definitely, I think the hardest problem I had was driving was extremely different.
It was too easy.
I actually went over 30 miles per hour in Utah. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's definitely a place where everyone seems to be obsessed with the outside and extracurricular activities. It's more family oriented in the sense that places close earlier during the weekday, and they're closed on Sunday, a lot of them. So you really do find more time for the things that are important that in New York kind of slip away to a deference for work, I think. And it's been nice. That being said, my family is all in New York, so it's given me more time for myself. But I like Utah. I think it's, I love New York too, but I think it's just they're both equally great in their own regard.
Utah is fantastic. I have a client in Provo, and when I'd never been until a couple years ago, and I flew into Salt Lake, and I'm like, why are there not more people here? This is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was
It's
definitely less
clean.
people.
People are friendly. Yeah, weird beer, but I mean, other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
If you like being outside, hard pressed to find anywhere better.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's great. The elevation actually took me a hard time to get used to. I think probably 6 months when I first moved. I couldn't sleep. But yeah, it was interesting. But hopefully I'm training better now in Utah, and exercising at higher elevation is helping me run in New York. Well, I'm going to test that theory out today.
Yeah, you're gonna be able to like get a PR, because you're not having so much less oxygen in your lungs that you're just fly.
But when Megan rides her Peloton, she vapes a lot and finds that she gets a very similar response out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just limits the oxygen in.
There you go.
That's what I do.
To each her own,
Anyway, have you picked up any, like, cause it's so outdoorsy and you come from New York that your outdoor options are, the park. I mean, have you picked up any outdoor hobbies while you've been there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I started skiing. I had never skied in New York. I think growing up, our family just, was kind of cost prohibitive for us. So I went out to Utah and started skiing, and it's awesome. Since I never skied in New York, what I'm told is that the snow is ice here. So it's like powder in Utah. It's not as frigidly cold as it is in New York, and winters are just like a winter wonderland. It's awesome.
Yeah, like I live in South Jersey, and I grew up skiing, but I grew up in Connecticut, and we had like mountains, but they weren't really mountains. They were like just hills that had some trails on them, and they were all ice. But I grew up going, go skiing every Friday night at the the little mounts, whatever it was called, Stellington.
Yeah, sure. In your jeans, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're definitely in your jeans. But here there's like no hills or anything. And when we talk about skiing, I'm like, well, that just sounds like way too much work. There's nothing closer than 2.5 hours. It's just, and it's the Poconos. Like we just don't do skiing anymore.
I mean, I've never gone skiing on the East Coast, but if you're a skier, I think there's no better place to be in the world probably than Utah. But
yeah, my brother lives in Colorado, and he says he has very good things to say about the skiing in Utah.
Yeah. Never been to Colorado either.
You got to have a 4-wheel drive. You have the best off-road.
Yeah, you need snow tires, which is a new thing I found out this winter. I had no idea that was a thing. So yeah, but yeah, it's pretty treacherous going up and down those mountains, avalanches and all those things. So it's fun. It's worth it.
Well, I'm so glad that you joined us today. I'm glad that you're enjoying Utah. Do you think you're ever going to go back to New York? Or are you going to stay for a while?
Who knows? Yeah, no plans right now. Definitely would like to get another ski season in for sure. So I have no plans to return yet, but you never know. So we'll see.
Yeah, you'll have to have Rick take you like heli skiing. Then
I get my own helicopter and then we'll be fine back and forth. But yeah, he does. We do insure that too. So
I would hope so.
So yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I really enjoyed chatting with you today, and enjoy your time. If all your extra free time, I'm really jealous. I can't say I work 24 hours a day, but I'm really jealous that you have all this extra time.
Yeah, it's been fun. So we'll get you there. No worries. But all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot.